So a lot of this research that we read about, believe it, is coming from your blood and your tissue as Africans. This is very interesting too, and if you're interested in copying these down, I think as parents you need to have these on board to start studying them. This is a really nice, wonderful expose, a fantastic voyage through the body. And a lot of the geometry and a lot of the art forms that I'm seeing expressed as furniture, lamps, kitchen icons, etc., are actually recreations of tissue structure. But because we don't really get a chance to look at our tissue through a microscope, because we really don't get a chance to see it from another perspective, we are not recognizing that we're sitting, feeding ourselves, drinking from ourselves, because these are all structures that actually exist in us. So this is a fantastic example to just show you how art form now is really, again, another expression of who we are. This is kind of an older one, that's why I said I had to buy a really huge database computer. This is in '97. A database computer to start scanning and putting stuff in. And let me just tell you about that real quick. Be very leery of the internet, because the internet takes upon itself to actually reprogram your database of what is real and what isn't. It is actually now becoming the international world source for information. But the controllers of the internet are deciding what's going to be available to you and what isn't. And so if you're doing what I call advanced research and documentation, etc., we can't necessarily rely on the internet to have the information, which means that you have to have your own data collection system. And as I begin to actually build my ideas about tissue regeneration, etc., and the functioning of the African body, I have to keep my own data, because as soon as I'm accused that that's ridiculous and there's no research, if I'm relying on the internet to basically prove them wrong, I will look like a fool. Okay, so you have to understand that a lot of this will not be accessible. There are areas in the internet that basically you can't access. Okay, so if you are not beyond what they call the digital divide, and that's interesting. So if you don't have DSL lines, if you don't have digital access, the frequency that this information, etc., can be and will be stored on the internet, the average person won't have access to it. So it will actually look like just a blind wall to you when you try to access it. That's because the frequency of which it's coming from, you will not be able to hit with your machine. So you have to pay attention that they're already segmenting information, okay, based on frequency of how it's stored, etc. And if you don't have the technology to enter into those high frequencies, it's not going to be available to you, and you'll be held responsible for what you can access. Again, how the brain learns to talk, how the brain learns, etc., is extremely important for us to understand, because that tells us what our role is as parents, as to what we have to do to make sure that all segments of this brain is actualized. I want you to really bear with me today, and I really want you to deep breathe, because I'm going to give you a lot of data here that's very important. I do have this one particular lecture on the 8 circuits of the brain. I really call it 7 circuits of the brain. It's very difficult to talk about the 8th circuit because it's not tangible, it's not matter as you know it, so we just talked about 7 of them right now. But you have to understand neurologic development and neurologic function to understand what's being expected of you as parents. Just very quickly, let me see a few more. Since I was trained initially to deal with women, which means that we're dealing with all life forms, because as you know, the gateway to this dimension is feminine. And everything comes through that collective before it defines itself as being masculine, etc. It's very interesting looking at what they're saying. So this was very interesting, the studies that they're doing, looking at women, what rage is about, etc. Again, Scientific America, and it's been interesting. The last 6 months, this magazine totally has literally devoted itself to the African. And this is a magazine that has never in its history had any need for anything that was melanated to be on any of its pages, for any commercials, for any scientific data, etc. But the last 2 magazines that have come out, one has been totally devoted to muscle. They have this beautiful specimen of the African American male, and it's devoted to muscle and genes. And they put him on the cover to let you know this is a prototype for which we are actually scrutinizing muscular development, etc., for the genetic pool. The article before that came out where they were looking at super athletes and genetic makeup. And all the athletes that they basically were indicating that they were researching on, they all were African American males and females. So it has continued to go on. This is the face of an African. So as we talk about what science will know in the year 2000, I do a biotechnology lecture where every form of tissue that you can think of now can really be made in a laboratory. And one of my greatest regrets goes out to the fact that women for so many decades were told how unimportant your uterus was, and that it really wasn't any big thing and you could just have it taken out. Well, guess what? They have a market for you. You can now buy a uterus for $14,000 because they actually are growing them in tissue. So one of my magazines, they have a picture of the uteruses that they grow. And so therefore, for poor women, they claim that are born without a uterus, which is so rare. Okay, you do not go through all this trouble to basically grow a uterus that you will sew into, 1 in 700,000 women. No, they do not do that. That's bad marketing. Okay, it's bad investment. But now they're growing uteruses and they're selling it for $14,000. So if you want now to buy your uterus back, you have to pay for it. Again, buying in the future, the new drugs that are available, the new foods, etc. It goes on and on and on and on. So I do want you to know, and I do want you to really look at and ask yourself, what do you do with your spare time as a parent? Okay, what is your real goal for your child? One of my concerns is that since Africans in America have been there for 400 years, we have still failed to recognize that there's some basic needs, or what I call First Circuit awarenesses, that have to be completed for us and by us. And that is to provide for yourself a food to eat, a place to stay, to educate yourself and your children, and to create a means of being able to acquire whatever the agreed currency is to do that. And so being in America, Africans have been able to acquire all different types of positions, etc., to do in and everything. It was built literally by the African, but still in all, they're completely dependent on others to provide those 4 things for them: the education for their children and themselves, the food that they eat, the buildings that they live in, and the jobs that they have, which is really incredible when you think about it. Okay, we're going to talk about how an individual can be reared for hundreds of years and still miss understanding the basic things that they have to do for their own personal growth and development. Okay. Dr. Emmy talked about this when I came in yesterday. He was just talking about the science of self, okay? And this is extremely important, and this is the science that you want to spend the rest of your life studying. Once you know yourself, you know this dimension. So the study of and the application of the knowledge of who you know you are and what you know you have been created to be begins the venture of the science of self. So I always use this template for myself. Again, this is another icon of instruction. The Great Pyramids are another icon of instruction. Okay. Yeah, another icon of instruction. Again, so for those of us who have the genetic memory, that's real important to remember. I think Dr. Emmy talked about the amount of money that was being invested in to study the Aboriginal component in Australia. Well, the Aborigines are a gene pool of themselves because they have more chromosomes than all of the humans on the planet. So do not think that everybody has 42 chromosomes. That's not true. And the more chromosomes you have, it is a reflection of how much data you have on board about this dimension. So DNA, your chromosomes are actually a living library of your available history of what has happened in this dimension. Okay, so understand that. So from this icon, again, this icon is very powerful, but one of the things it does say, nothing can be built by an individual that lasts longer than he or she does unless others are willing to sustain it if that individual has not actualized his or her own immortality. You gotta understand that.
See, this building says right here that the people who built it were immortal, because you cannot impart a quality to anything that you don't already have. Nobody took care of this except Mother Nature. So for it to still stand on its own without human beings helping it, as a matter of fact, they chiseled it to what it is, okay, says something about the quality of individuals that built this. But you have to understand that. The specimens that were taken from the mummies, they already know that the mummies were alive for